Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first I would like to talk with you about the negotiations that currently is taking place between Ukraine and Russia, at least according to different sources. So according to different sources, Ukraine and Russia, with Qatar as a mediator, are in talks to end mutual attacks on energy infrastructure. This is very important for Ukraine to stop these attacks because, as you know, for the previous few months, the Russians haven't been attacking the Ukraine energy facilities. Some people are saying that the Russians are just trying to accumulate as many as possible missiles. Some sources are saying that the Russians are waiting for November, because November is the first month in the year where the Ukrainians, where this entire region can suffer, can start feel the consequences of bad weather, of very bad weather, because winter is coming. And Zelensky understands that most likely the Russians are going to attack the energy facilities, the rest of energy facilities in Ukraine, which will lead to complete collapse of Ukraine, which will lead to complete defeat of Ukrainians and probably capitulation. So that's why there is such a talks. The Ukrainians are trying to force the Russians to resume this negotiation process, and I remind you that the Russians stopped this negotiation process that had been taking place in August because the Ukrainians invaded in the Kursk region trying to get the stronger negotiation positions. But now we see that those stronger negotiation positions currently the not very good thing for the Ukrainians, because they realize that without removing their forces from the territory of Russian Federation, the Russians most likely will not resume the negotiations about end of mutual attacks on energy infrastructure. Another important thing that most likely, and a lot of things, lots of events, lots of updates indicates that most likely these negotiations are going not in Ukraine's favor, and most likely there are going to be no solution for this situation, and most likely during the next few weeks the Russians will begin attacks on Ukraine energy facilities. And this is not the thing that the Russians are bad or the Russians are good or the Russians don't know another way how to fight with the Ukrainians. The Russians have their own problems. Russia is very they have a very strong economy, but this economy is not so strong to fight with the Ukrainians for several years, like 10 or 20 years or even 5 years. For Russia, it's better to finish the war as soon as possible, and the best solution for this is to create another blackout for Ukraine and to force the Ukrainians to capitulate, because nobody will be able and to support Ukraine if the entire population of this country will exit the Ukraine. So that's why we start receiving very interesting statements from Poland, because for some reason Poland has requested US permission to shoot down Russian missiles over Ukraine. We got this report during the previous 24 hours, and this is very important because, as we know, the Ukrainians for the previous several days didn't ask Poland to ask United States of America to do this, but most likely this is the consequences of failed negotiations in Qatar between Russia and Ukraine to end this mutual attack on the energy facilities. Furthermore, we got additional piece of news that bipartisan House members push Biden to allow Poland to shoot down Russian missiles over Ukraine. Maybe all the things with the missiles, all these current negotiations is the reaction and the results of possible use of North Korean forces in the territory of Suja, and all those stories and all those fairy tales about North Koreans served to this situation when Ukrainians and Poland tried to ask permission from the United States of America to bring down the missiles. Nobody knows for sure, but one thing we know for sure, that, for example, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians launched the massive missile attack in the southern part of Odessa. Lots of facilities, lots of warehouses, ammo depots were destroyed. The sources are saying that 6 Su-57 and 1 Su-34 aircraft entered the Black Sea to strike at the Ukrainians, Ukrainian armed forces on the territory of Odessa, and probably this is for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation. Up to 10 aircrafts were operating in the Black Sea. And some sources are saying that there were explosions on the territory of this bridge in the southern part of Odessa. At least there were several videos that show some explosions, and the author of this video stated that this. This is the explosions in the area of strategic bridge in Zatoka region. So this is exactly the bridge, and maybe the Russians managed to destroy it. We don't know for sure. We don't know the results, but obviously we understand that Ukrainians, if they want to continue the special military operation, and indeed the Ukrainians want and the Western countries want, first of all, they need to secure and to establish complete air superiority, and they understand that without negotiations they won't be able to do this. And of course they need to show the strong will, and probably a part of the stronger will, we might see the Poland bringing down the Russian missiles, at least in the western part of Ukraine. Now let's move to the situation on the ground, because we continue receiving lots of updates, and the most important is usually updates are coming from the South Donetsk direction. During the previous 24 hours, Russians managed to improve their positions in the South Donetsk direction. At least that was stated by different mappers, like pro-Russian and like pro-Ukrainian mappers. According to them, during the previous night, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to maintain the line of combat contact between the village of Novoukrainka and Bagayavlenka, and to force the Ukrainians to fall back from these fields, basically from this artillery pocket. Now the Ukrainians are trying to regroup, they try to save as many as possible assets and to move further to the next defense line between along the Sukhi Yala river. Now let's move to the Kurakhivka direction. During the previous 24 hours, during the previous night, we haven't received anything about the status of the Russian Russian forces in the eastern part of Kurakhivka. Most likely there are very heavy clashes. The Russians are trying to dig in deeper. The most important updates are coming from Kurakhivka, the settlement, the last settlement from this pocket. And according to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions. We have additional geolocations. So this is the situation by the end of the 30th of October. As you can see, the Ukrainians probably had positions on the territory of the settlement, but as for the beginning of 31st of October, according to different mappers, there is some gap between different mappers, but most of them are saying that Ukrainians either have already left the territory to the village of Stepanovka, or about to do this, and they will do this during the next 12 hours. So let's discuss in details. For example, this is the report, this is the map that was provided by pro-Russian resources, and according to them, the Ukrainians left this pocket, including the village of Vovchenka, the village of Kurakhivka, and these facilities. So this is the information from this territory, and some pro-Russian sources also confirmed that Kurakhivka under complete Russian control. Now let's talk about the pro-Ukrainian sources. The pro-Ukrainians are saying that the most of Kurakhivka is under complete Russian control, but there are around 10-20% is marked as contested area or as a gray zone. So most likely rearguard forces still holding these lines, but they are retreating slowly, step by step. And as for the Russians, today we got the video that show us another 24 hours of clashes of the between the 114th motor rifle brigade of the Armored Forces of Russian Federation and rearguard forces of Armored Forces of Ukraine in the southern and the southeastern part of the settlement of Kurakhivka. And lots of episodes, and the most important episodes are coming, of course, from the final part of the video. And in this part we can see the Russians that were raising the flag. And I would like to point your attention exactly to this episode, to this video. The building was geolocated. This is exactly the place where the Russians raised the flag in the central part. I would like to point your attention that according to this video, was made just probably during the previous several hours. As you can see, the entire part of the village of Kurakhivka wasn't damaged as a result of clashes. As you can see, most of the building weren't damaged. Like 100% building exactly from this episode, from this angle of view, weren't damaged as a result of clashes. So the Ukrainians basically left the territory, and the most important for the Russians, they managed to save infrastructure, they managed to save buildings, and they managed to save possibilities for civilians from the settlement to return back to this area, probably when the Russians will be able to force the Ukrainians, let's say, from the entire Kurakhivka direction. People will be able to return, and this is a very big plus when talking about the finishing and conducting this, especially this Russian offensive operation. Now let's move further. Let's talk a little bit about the Selidova direction. Today we got additional confirmation about additional Russian progress in the western direction. Nothing special. We haven't adjusted the map because we have adjusted based on some videos that were published recently, but we just confirmed, the Ukrainian sources confirmed that indeed there is a progress of the Russians. As for the city of Selidova, today the pro-Russian mappers and pro-Ukrainian mappers reported that the Russians managed to improve their positions on the line between the village of Vishneva and Petrov Petrovka, Grigorovka. So the Russians captured additional 3 lines, fortifications, and got a little bit closer to the next Ukrainian defense chain. We're talking once again about the settlements of Petrovka and Grigorovka. So these are the changes on the ground during the previous 24 hours. Nothing special, but obviously the Russians are moving. And now let's move further and let's talk about the Chasov Yar direction during the previous 24 hours. More precisely, yesterday we got the video of how the Ukrainians were ambushed by the Russians along N32 road, and for some reason we forgot, or maybe we haven't mentioned this situation, and we haven't adjusted the map. We didn't adjust the map, and today we adjusted the map in Russian favor based on the video that was published yesterday. Additional positions along N32 road. Sever's direction, nothing special. The southern Kupiansk direction, nothing special. The northern Kupiansk direction, we have additional changes on the ground according to different mappers, and the Russians, according to information we have, managed to improve their positions from Mesazharivka, Stelmahovka in the western direction, and the Russians are about to collapse, are about to caught in colder the Ukrainian positions inside of this artillery pocket between Berestova, Pishchan, and Stelmahovka itself. So most likely during the next few days, maybe even hours, the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back from this territory, and the Russians will be able to maintain these positions along this red line and to take under control everything between these fields. This is very important because the Russians in this case would be able to shorten the line of combat contact and to get closer to the river of Oskol itself. As for the Sudzha direction, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians resumed their attempts to attack the Ukrainian forces in this cauldron. We have just one video of Russian attack. In this video we can see 3 personal carriers of the armored forces of Russian Federation with a significant number of infantry that were trying to storm another forest. Most likely that was under complete Ukrainian control. So we see the personal carriers got as close as possible to the forest, then we can see the process of how the Russians landed in this area, and the stormtroopers began attacking possible Ukrainian positions on the territory of forest itself. So currently this video shows the clashes in this area. We don't know for sure whether the Russians managed to take everything under control, but at least we have the video that confirms that the Russians entered this part of this small part of the forest. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.